back to the Unfiltered Political Lens, where we explore history, politics, and forgotten stories that continue to shape our world today. If you enjoy deep dives into the ideas behind the headlines, be sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel and share it with others who appreciate thoughtful discussions about history and government. Today's episode examines one of the most overlooked turning points in American history, a shift that may begin decades before the World Wars and continues to influence the debate about our government today, our liberty and individual rights. So settle in, because the story you're about to hear isn't just about the past. It's about understanding how America became then the nation we know today. What if one of the most important events that transformed America happened long before the Great Depression, World War II, or even the political battles that dominate today's news cycle? What if the real turning point occurred decades earlier, when a new generation of intellectuals began questioning the very principles that inspired the American Revolution? To understand that story, we must travel back to the nation's founding and examining a vision of liberty that many Americans rarely discuss today. This is the story of how a philosophical revolution helped reshape the relationship between our citizens, government, and the meaning of freedom itself. The founding fathers built the United States on the belief that the right did not come from government, kings, or legislatures. They believed that the rights were natural, inherent, and belonged to every person simply because they were human. Our government existed to protect those rights, not create them, and its powers were initially limited to prevent the concentration of a specific authority. The philosophy became the foundation of the Declaration of Independence, the Constitution, and the systems of checks and balances that defined the young republic. For much of the 19th century, we're talking about America, where it had expanded rapidly while largely operating within this framework. However, the Industrial Revolution had transformed society in ways the founders could never have imagined, and as cities grew and the factories multiplied, railroads connected distant regions, and economic challenges became increasingly complex, many of the thinkers began asking whether a limited government designed for an agrarian republic could effectively manage an industrial nation of millions. These questions would set the stage for one of our most significant intellectual shifts in American history. During the 19th century, many American scholars traveled to Europe, particularly Germany, where universities were developing new theories about society and government and history. There, they encountered ideas that viewed the state not merely as protector of rights, but as an active force capable of guiding social progress and national development. Some returned to the United States. They were convinced that the modern society had required a more energetic and an organized government than the founders had envisioned. However, rather than limiting the power, they increasingly focused on how power could be used to solve the social and economic problems. Now, at the same time, the science and technology were transforming everybody's daily life at an unprecedented pace. The electricity illuminated the cities. Medical breakthroughs improved public health, and industrial innovations had increased the productivity across entire economies. Many reformers began to wonder whether the same scientific method that revolutionized the industry could also improve our government. This belief gave rise to growing confidence in experts, administrators, and specialized agencies that could manage our complex problems more efficiently than traditional politicians or institutions could. Of course, as these ideas spread, another major philosophical change emerged in the form of pragmatism. Earlier generations often spoke of self-evident truths and universal principles that existed regardless of circumstance. Pragmatists increasingly emphasize that the practical results, arguing that ideas should be judged by whether they worked rather than whether they conformed to a fixed philosophical doctrine. Now, the shift encouraged experimentation and reform, and the belief that the society itself could be redesigned to achieve desired outcomes. The movement gained momentum during the Progressive Era as well. momentum during the Progressive Era, when many Americans sought the solutions to the challenges created by rapid industrialization. Reformers advocated for stronger regulatory institutions and expanded administrative agencies and a larger role for government and managing those economic and social issues. They viewed these changes as necessary adaptations to a modern world that was more complex than the one known by our founders. Critics, however, worried about concentrating authority in unelected bureaucracies, risked weakening the constitutional safeguards had been designed to protect the individual liberty. Now then came the event that accelerated these trends more dramatically than anyone could have imagined. World War I, the demands of the total war required governments to coordinate industrial transportation, communications, labor, and resources on an unprecedented scale. For many leaders, the conflict demonstrated that large administrative systems could organize entire societies toward common goals. Powers that once seemed extraordinarily suddenly became practical tools of governance. When the war ended, however, the intellectual landscape had changed. Alongside the political one, governments around the world emerged larger, and more centralized and more involved in daily life than they had been before the conflict. The idea that the experts and the administrators should play a significant role in managing society had gained enormous credibility. What began as philosophical debates in universities had become a governing model that would influence much of the 20th century. Now just think about that. The story of America from the founding era to the aftermath of the World War is not simply a tale of political parties or elections. It's the story of two competing versions of government that continuing to shape debates as of today. And one vision sees government primarily as a guardian of natural rights that already belong to individuals, while the other views government as instruments capable of guiding society toward collective progress. Understanding how and why the transformation occurred may be one of the most important keys to understanding modern America itself. So the question remains, was the shift a necessary response to an increasingly complex world, or did it represent a departure from the founders' original vision of liberty and limited government? Historians, political thinkers, and citizens have continued to debate that question more than a century later. The answer may influence how we understand not only America's past, but its future. And perhaps that is why the forgotten turning point remains one of the most important stories in America's history. I want to thank you for joining me on another episode of the Unfiltered Political Lens. If you found this monologue valuable, let me know what your thoughts are in the comments below. Do you believe the changes that emerged before and during World War I strengthened America, or did they move the nation away from the founders' original vision? History often reveals that most important turning points are not always the ones we learn from about in school, but the ideas and the philosophies that quietly reshape society over generations. Until next time, stay informed and stay curious and keep asking questions. And remember, understanding the past is often the key to understanding our future. We'll see you in the next one. Peace.